I either struggle with my headset or my blazer. This morning I'm going to struggle with my blazer. But this lets you know that I've changed to speaking mode. I'm going to quote a Baptist this morning. Please don't hold that against me. I think it's a great quote, whether you're a Baptist or a Methodist. Faith, that's it, those are the only two. Faith is a relationship more than a system of thought. Christianity is someone, not something. This quote is kind of like a theological version of the bumpers at the bowling alley, I think. We understand the concept, but how important it is to help something, for something to help us be kept on track, because no matter, I think it's hard for me to remember this, because no matter how many good ideas we collect, no matter how many bad ideas we reject, we never just arrive at Christianity because of the collection or rejection of specific ideas. Ideas are really important, but they are never the sum total of any relationship, not with a person. Maybe it's a relationship with an idea. That's different than a relationship with a person. Motives matter. The question why matters. The person of Jesus Christ goes deeper than we do. And I think his reasons are more beautiful than our reasons. And it's essential that we know him, not just his positions that he takes on things. Yes, his positions that he takes on things reveal his nature. They do not constitute the entirety of his nature. The person of Christ is the highest priority because he is the definition of the things that we try to define without him. I am the way and the truth and the life, says the person of Jesus. So missing this means missing who he is. In middle school, I thought God expected me to stand up for all the individual Christian things I'd collected, to call out incorrect beliefs, to fight, figuratively speaking, like a Christian soldier waging a holy war against the heretics. In middle school, what could go wrong, right? I remember my teacher one day talking about Martin Luther King Jr., and I had had just about enough of that. I raised my hand and I said, Martin Luther King Jr. was a communist. Like Jesus wants us to. There were some other things that thankfully I never took much of a public stand on. The evil nature of snare beats on 2 and 4, for example. This was before Chris Tomlin was a thing. He came along and corrected all of our theology. Thank you, Chris Tomlin. The risk of ruining my witness by turning around in the liquor store parking lot by accident. I didn't see the sign, and now my witness is done. It's over. My point is that at a very tender age, I had already collected many strong positions in the name of a person, Jesus. But I didn't really know his reasons for these positions that I thought were his. And I didn't really know him. Peacemaking wasn't even on my radar. In my middle school mind, there were two groups of people, the lost and the found, and I wanted to be in the found category. Best way I knew how to do that was to take stands on positions. The more, the better. I thought I was proving how right I was. I think what Professor Hambrick was saying about someone versus something is that apart from a relationship with Christ, being right and wrong about issues doesn't constitute being a Christian. You can be right about them all. Now, I've used examples that I hope are somewhat amusing so we can talk about this a little bit more easily, because had I used trending topics from the internet, I think our collective peace on earth and goodwill toward men in this room may have left the building a little quicker. You know, that holy war mentality gets stirred up pretty easily. And of course there are things that deserve our very serious care. I love understanding God through ideas that I think resonate with his nature. But Christ tells us, do not allow fear over the way those ideas seem to be working out for you to eclipse our love for him, to eclipse our hope in him. I think when we lose our internal peace, this is often the culprit. And when we lose our sense of peace with each other, I think it's often because we're not loving as we love ourselves. I tend to be at peace with myself an awful lot in terms of how I feel about myself. I don't go walking around going, man, that Justin, that guy, if I could change one person, it would be Justin Patton. I tend to be fairly at peace with myself. And sometimes I'm afraid I just miss the point of loving others in that same way. Doesn't mean I've got everything right or others have everything right. But it's a motive. Let's look at Matthew chapter 10, starting in verse 34. I want to introduce more tension. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be those of his own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. I know it's not polite to break out a passage like this so early in the new year. Christmas was only a few weeks ago, and what did we sing? Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. And Jesus himself said, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you, I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. So after so much peace talk around Christmas time, I think Matthew 10:34 feels like a slap in the face. I mean, what's going on? Doesn't it seem a little contradictory if we're honest? Permission to feel like maybe you found a contradiction, but you wouldn't say so because then you get thrown out of the church. Just let the feeling pass over you, because it probably comes from time to time. So what's happening when we feel these things? We know there is no contradiction in God, not any real contradiction. So what's going on? Simply this: the crux of peace, the crux of reconciliation with God is the cross. The sword in verse 34 is the cross. And there's nothing, not right answers, not the love of family, not even one's physical death, that takes precedence over the cross. In fact, we're talking about it this way because the cross does precede our peace. This comes first. The cross is the revelation of God's love. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are the source and definition of love. People complain about the cross sometimes. They say, how could a loving God do that to his Son? The Father and the Son are one. Neither one experiences suffering apart from the other. Divine love chose suffering because it was the only way to reconcile sinners. So the cross is this supernova that breaks our brokenness. Full stop. You can be right about a lot of things, and that's going to help you. But it's not going to help you break your brokenness. The cross did that all by itself. Jesus did that all by himself. In real time, when we're reading this passage, Jesus was telling Jewish families that they were going to be divided over this. The disciples were going to have to be ready to accept physical death at the hands of their own countrymen. Jesus was telling the disciples that they would have to follow him in the same kind of death. You know, our world is not like the Near East, the ancient Near East. So it's easy for us to adapt persecution, the idea of persecution, in modern terms and come up with some fairly tame versions. But in short order, Paul watched Jesus' words come to fruition when he endorsed and stood there as Stephen was martyred. Stephen had confessed the betrayal and murder of Jesus at the hands of the Jews. He had said that he saw the heavens open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God, and that was all it took. He was murdered for his witness of the cross. It's amazing to me when I think about the fact that Paul went from endorsing that to experiencing it in a short period of time. I often think of scenes from movies, and Caleb and I have talked about the scene where Boromir dies in Lord of the Rings, and how moving that is in terms of a person changing their opinion from, I will never follow this person, to, I would have followed you to the very end. But I gotta say, I think Paul did it better than Boromir. I really do. And I think it's safe to say that this passage was way harder for the people who first heard it than it is for us to have to deal with today. So what does it mean for us to love Christ more than family, to take up our cross and lose our life? A gentleman named Stanley Hauerwas offers the following insight. Jesus reminds the disciples and us that to faithfully witness to his peace, there is always time to be patient. And our task is not to force the kingdom into existence, but to endure. To endure turns out to be the only way we can witness to Christ's kingdom. So we know, we have experienced the reality that we are not likely to be faced with physical death. People are not coming to our house and threatening to drag us out and stone us for our witness for Christ. But we're still called to endure suffering. The cross is still the cross. I want to suggest to you that Christians don't fight, and we never have, the way that the world fights. We endure with hope and patience and peace because of faith in something that the world does not see. I wish I'd understood that better in middle school. Yeah, of course we speak the truth. We don't shy away from that, but we do it in love, or we had better, or we haven't read our Bibles, have we? And then we often suffer for speaking the truth, but not in the ways that I think a lot of people like to magnify. And if you have a problem being on the suffering end of this equation, you are not worthy of Jesus. He said it, I didn't. Christians endure because we know that all humans are plenty wrong, including ourselves. We also know that we are all loved and that truth is a person to know, which is very different from a set of things to be right about. This cross is a very unique kind of sword. Any revelation of love described as a sword would be pretty unique, right? And Jesus showed us the nature of the cross. It turns out we are supposed to stand at the pointy end. We are supposed to not throw stones. We are supposed to be looking for our own cross, not a cross for me to put markup on or to eviscerate him otherwise with. This is further illustrated in verse 39 when Jesus speaks about finding one's life by losing it for his sake, right? This turning of everything upside down. Things are not working the way that the world thinks that they're supposed to work. So how do we lose our lives for Christ in America in 2025? Because we know it's not going to be like Bonhoeffer. You know, Bonhoeffer suffered when he stood with the Jews in Nazi, and it was for a purpose, to witness to the image of God in Jewish men and women. Martin Luther King Jr. expected suffering when he promised to wear down racism by his capacity to suffer. His words. And he had two purposes: to win freedom for Black Americans and to win the hearts of their oppressors, to make peace through suffering. So, I come back to this question: what do we suffer for today, and for what purpose? Suffering today still looks like loving another person as we love ourselves. You know, our flesh never likes that. Not even once. If you want to suffer, immediately pick someone to love like you love yourself. And it will be terrible. Just right away terrible. Try it. You'll have lots of opportunities today, probably with your own family. But it also leads to peace. And that's the thing that we hope in. We are picking motives. When we find the motive of Christ, we are picking that motive for ourselves. I think suffering in 2025 often looks like staying connected when we would rather not stay connected. You know, maybe some New York Times bestseller has suggested that your church needs to have the right position on climate change. And guess what? We don't have a position on climate change. Should we get on that? Let's get right on that. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're not. There are a ton of books making a ton of money by selling ideas as hills to die on. Usually one per chapter. You can buy a book and get 8 reasons to not be at peace with your neighbor. But these are usually pretty silent about suffering. These books are typically not selling suffering or endurance or the hope of reconciliation. They are just selling being right on a point. Suffering today looks like giving up self-righteousness and seeing sin as Jesus saw sin. I haven't said the name Helmut Thielicke for a long time. But this is a great Helmut Thielicke quote. Jesus saw in this sin something alien, something that really did not belong to the other person, something that merely chained and mastered him, from which Jesus could free him and bring him back to his real self. Jesus was able to love because he loved right through the layer of mud. I think we all know somebody, maybe it's us, who has made something a hill to die on. Maybe they're a Christian, maybe they're not. But unless that hill is the cross, it has likely not led to peace. In fact, I can guarantee you it has not led to peace. I don't know whether you should endure with that person or not. I can't make that decision for you. But I do have some questions that might help in making that decision. Has that person seen that you truly believe that they're on equal footing with you? That you really see them as an equal? They may not understand why. That's the cross. But maybe in time they might, if we're patient. Do you operate out of fear when you're around this person? Or are you operating from an untroubled patience? Have they seen your willingness to place your favorite things second to the person of Christ? That is, can they look at you and tell that your relationship with Christ is about a person first? That he's real. He's not an excuse for you to get your way pushed on somebody else. I mean, that is what the vast majority of people who look at Christians today and write us off, I'm convinced that's what they think. They think Jesus is an excuse for us to manipulate them. And we reveal that that's not the case by patience and endurance. If you say no to these questions, then my guess, I don't know, but my guess is you have an opportunity to suffer a little more yet. Contrary to popular opinion, we are not waiting for specific results. We're really not. How freeing to know that I am not waiting for a specific result. We're simply following Christ. We're loving people as we love ourselves, and we're enduring the rest of it. Peacemaking is costly precisely because we may never see the results, so we have to give them up. We can't force the kingdom into existence, but we can endure with one another when it's hard. I know I'm wrong about some things. I don't know what things they are. I mean, I would change them if I did, but I know I'm not wrong about the cross of Christ. And as we come to know the person of God, his motives really do become our motives, and that peace on the other side of the cross seeps in. God so loved the world that he chose to take all of its wrongness upon himself, to atone for it by his suffering, and establish his peace in knowing the person of Jesus Christ. We make that real with our lives when we accept the way of the cross. Adam?